Well, hello, everyone. Let's kick this off. This is Andy Moore talking to you, and welcome, please, to KM World Magazine's webcast series. I'm publisher of KM World Magazine. I'll be your host and moderator today. Thank you all for coming. Today's presentation is part of a series, as I think you mostly know. So please join us for each of these events. They're usually available on Tuesdays, but you need to check your email and our website for any changes in the schedule. But regardless of the schedule, please come and join us for these educational, live, interactive web events. I'm really pleased to welcome all of you, and there's a nice crowd of you today, for today's installment, which is a discussion that we're going to call Understanding the Value and the Risk Behind Big Data. Now, obviously, big data is a big issue. There are at least two schools of thought, maybe more, but there are at least two main ones that I know of regarding big data. One part of the organization sees all that information out there and wants to take advantage of it. The other part views it as dark data. It's undiscovered, it's unanalyzed, it's unreachable, unless you have the proper analysis tools and skills to get to it. And that's the sort of tension in the big data world right now. I think it's fair to say that both are a little bit right. Analytics for big data can bring great value to many, many, many business applications, like social media, for example, market analysis, for example, internal information analysis, for example. It's also being applied toward governance and regulatory and compliance matters. So analytics is becoming a really big deal in big data. Today we'll learn how companies are beginning to step up to that big data analytics challenge in order to take advantage of all their data, no matter where or how or if it resides, and how to avoid the risk that it might represent. That's what we're talking about today. I'm going to introduce you to today's speaker. Today we're talking with John Falahi. John is the Senior Vice President of Products for the Content Analyst Company. Now, let me tell you about John. John's responsible for the product strategy and vision at Content Analyst. Prior to joining them, he was a principal product planner at Microsoft, you've heard of them, where he was part of a small team responsible for setting up the Office Product Division's long-term product direction and strategy. Now, maybe it was a small team, but not a small job. John has also led Fast Search's OEM business and application product management team, and was very involved in the integration efforts of acquisitions and the company's marketing messaging. We'll hear from John in a minute, but first a little bit of housekeeping. As always, there will be a Q&A session after the presentation. You can ask your questions anytime during the event. You can start now if you'd like by hitting that Q&A tab on your console and hitting submit. I'll get to your questions and I will read them aloud to John and we'll discuss them. If yours isn't asked during the event, however, never fear. We will get you an answer offline after the event via email. So please feel free to ask any questions that you would like to ask of John. Now, I am not going to take up any more time because John has got a lot to say and he's got a lot of information to impart to us. So I am going to now welcome John Falahi. Did I say it wrong?
You got it right, Andy.
to the stage. Please welcome John. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone, for attending. We'll try to make this very informative and plan, some time at the end for Q&A so we can try to get to a number of different questions and topics. Because as Andy stated, it's a pretty broad area. I've had a lot of background in, as Andy stated, with information access systems were at Fast Search and Transfer. We did a lot, and that got acquired by Microsoft. Still looked actively in the area, and then joined Content Analyst. Give you just a quick background on the company and our focus, and then we'll dive into the topic. Content Analyst company was founded in 2004, but the core technology, latent semantic indexing, which is a key version of content analytics, it was actually invented at Belcor in the late 1980s. They have the patent. It was then sold off to a system integrator, SAIC, and in 2004, the technology was bought by a private investor to start the company. In that time, we've issued about 13 other patents around the technology and some other technology to keep advancing and investing in the analytics, its performance, its capabilities. One unique thing about the business, we're kind of like BASF, if you remember those old ads. We don't make the product, we just make the product better. We only sell to other software vendors and system integrators. And the reason why they come to us is we really work on kind of two problems: information classification and insight issues. So the partnerships that we have are fundamentally on helping people with their information workflow at some point in the process, either classifying the information with supervised or unsupervised classification schemes, and finding the latent relationships in the data itself. What are the relationships that the data is telling us, not predefined dictionaries or other terms? And again, we've designed it as a platform that can be plugged into anybody's software or built around, and we just build a team that allows people to integrate it and support those kinds of engineers. So that's a little of the background, but let's dive into the topic. Big data, I've been looking at it for years through different lenses, but here, for the last 3 or 4 years, we're really trying to understand the key things around the definition. The volume, velocity, variety, and complexity are driving two things to happen. People understanding that this data was created for a purpose at any different stage of the life cycle from many different perspectives in the business, whether it's the marketing end or business, collecting of consumer information, et cetera, or just internal emails, which are exploding as the way people communicate, but documenting their communication a little. When it's classified, the information is strategic. We know what it is, we know how to act on it, we know how to manage it, and it might even be that it's time to get rid of it. What happens also is today is a lot of companies also realize they have the term that's been used for a number of years. Some really good articles back in the 2008 and 2007 were written up calling the amount of information sitting out there, as Andy said, but not really understood what it is or why we're keeping it anymore, is dark data. And the problem is that data, without being classified so we know how to act on it, in many cases is a burden. We'll talk about that. And for a lot of companies, it becomes a liability, a risk, because there could be issues in there that cause an issue for governance issues or legal or EDiscovery problems. So the real underlying issue is how do we easily create and maintain a classification scheme or schemes that the company can apply easily throughout the entire life cycle of the document, because there might be extra classifications that happen later on post-creation that still need to be added as the document or email or other types of content move along in its life inside the company. So the real goal is how do we make it findable and how do we make it actionable? And one of the key things that happens is when we get to the extremes, we start generating a lot of things that were useful for a short period of time but might not be useful in a long period of time. So, one of the things that's going on is that people are saying lots of different things about it. I'll just take Gartner, for example. they just came out with a report where they're saying that corporate IT will spend well over $200 billion in the next 4 years on trying to address big data complexities. But if we look back a little bit, what we're really seeing is we built this problem ourselves by trying to solve other problems that we faced before. So they're really looking at big data as a driver for innovation to solve the new set of problems that we just fixed the old set of problems that are generating. And what do I mean by that? We've basically, in the last decade, dropped the cost of memory, improved high-speed networks, Moore's Law on CPUs is still on track, and storage prices are dropping, but the performance of storage is going up dramatically as we move to solid-state drives. One of the interesting things here is, 10 years ago, I don't think any of us, now I'm actually doing this from my home office, where I probably have better bandwidth than most corporations had 6 or 7 years ago, much less 3 or 4 years ago. Even the consumer has better network bandwidth, better performance, and better access to information, online information, than ever before. And inside of corporations, the performance is dramatic. So we've actually created this problem ourselves because we've actually built the systems that allow digital information to interact with people at a much higher rate than ever before because the pipes can carry it and we can generate it and track it much quicker. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. So maybe if we spend a second breaking down, the dimensions, 3 of the key dimensions for big data. The fourth one some people throw in is complexity, and we'll kind of talk about that in a touch. But if we really look what's going on with volume, velocity, and variety, we're still dealing with 3 fundamental principles. These are the ones people like to talk about, but it's scale, performance, and flexibility. But if we look at volume, the key issue here is that the amount of data that's being generated in all phases of our business, and we'll talk about one specifically, the marketing area, that it's just amazing that we've actually in the last 3 years caused, if you mentally can put in your mind a graph where the line that shows the growth of digital data kept in the company versus the line kind of going downward slope on the cost of storage, in the last 3 years, basically the volume of data growth has exceeded that other curve. So IT budgets now are spending money versus kind of covering their storage costs because the curve was going in the right direction, but now it's not keeping up. The velocity is also another issue where we just can't keep up with the performance characteristics. Most of the applications that we created, and even if updated over the last 5 or 6 years, were designed to leverage disk and maybe some CPU, but not memory. Now memory is turned cheap, and now you're hearing about in-memory solutions and people trying to redesign or re-architect applications so they can keep up literally with the velocity of information. And then the last one is variety. I think there are 2 issues here that are hidden. One that, at least from our perspective, we see a lot. One is the number and types of documents that people now are collecting digitally. But the other thing is the rapid evolution of language used, especially in the social media space, and collecting any information about our products or customer base or any of that, where terms are actually changing or being created hourly. The example that a friend of mine was talking about in one of our partners was they actually watched 4 or 5 lead bloggers that other people follow come up with some new terms that they had no idea what the term meant or how it was being used. They had to reread all the set of articles in order to go in and update their taxonomies in order to figure out how to track that. And they knew that they missed a key stream of information. So, one of the things that we really need to understand is how we're going to change the way we do things or augment existing systems so we can keep up with these 3 Vs. To me, it's one of the things in the software world I always talk about, and there's a blog posting up on our website about inspiration, innovation, and implementation. There's been lots of great ideas, lots of ways to figure it out, but it's all about how did we implement the solution that makes the difference. One of the other key areas another key kind of buzz term we're hearing is information governance. But if we really try to break it down, there are really kind of 2 things going on here. Again, it's the world switching to all digital content more and more inside a corporation. And because it's digital content, new rules, regulatory compliance issues are being applied to that information. And because companies are also concerned about internal issues like sexual harassment and fraud, distribution of intellectual property that's inappropriate because now electronically it can move instantaneously. It really changes the game. There are new rules going on here also. So this is just another offshoot of the world evolving from a mix of physical and digital data to nearly all digital information, and now coming up with the compliance rules on top of it. But we need to update the systems to really meet the problem. There is new approaches going on, and people with knowledge, it's just can we get them the tools to do it? If we look at the information governance area, it's really interesting. There was a nice blog article called "The Dangers of Infobestiality" at the latest Legal Tech show. Bill Tolson put it out. And he had some interesting numbers from the CGOC, the Compliance Governance and Oversight Council. They found that 1% of an organization's data is subject to legal hold, 5% under regulatory issues, and 25% had business issues. In other studies, we've actually looked at that less than 1% of the company's information in larger companies is a records management retained, controlled document. So it's been classified properly, good tools and procedures have been put in place, good behavior in the sense of the way it's being handled is done. Yet most of the company's information is not handled this way. So one of the nice things, a trend that's happening at ARMA and some other places, is where the records management team is now helping companies implement a consistent way to lay out classification across all the information, the strategic information. One of the things, though, that's also going on that is not talked about here on this slide, but is really kind of important, is defensible destruction. Just as much as we talk about what information we want to keep and why we want to keep it, one of the things that's also going on is projects where people are looking at their archives and now finding that I need to clean it up. The issue there is that before, IT kept everything and no one really worried about it. Now IT's got a cost problem, but they also have their other partner in the organization, the general counsel, saying, look, we need to get rid of stuff so we don't have the legal liability if we get called into court that old data, old records, are sitting around that we don't need to go plowing through or analyze and cost us time and potentially have a litigation risk. So one of the problems they face there is the records management and other people that have built taxonomies for the corporation's good information have spent long amount of time defining the rules and keywords to define each category within that taxonomy. But when it comes to junk, that's something that no one's really kind of tackled in that way. And looking for new alternatives like example-based categorization is one way that a lot of the companies are trying to solve that problem. If we look at one area, as Andy talked about, that also has kind of solved the problem, and I'll mention a few where they've had a problem with the 3 Vs, or at least 2 of the 3 Vs, and what are they doing to solve it? So in EDiscovery, This one is a great case study for people to look at, where the legal community for years did everything manually. They had software to track what they were doing, but reviewing of all documents was done by lawyers or paralegals to look through the information in case there was something that was responsive to the case, and trying to get rid of the non-responsive documents out of the workflow so they could just focus on what they need to. The problem is email just went through the roof, and that became another key thing that they all had to look at. So the manual review process didn't work. And here we're not talking about big data in the sense of the term, but relative to the usual workflow, it is big data. The velocity and variety and volume went through the roof versus the normal work in a case. When they basically about 4 years ago started applying advanced analytics into what they call technology-assisted review, the performance numbers are well over 10x over the manual process. And they found a few other interesting things. One, they got a consistent, deterministic process. So when they went into court, they could show, here's how I set this up, here's the steps I went through, and it became defensible. So they now have something that the court has signed off on, and there's a number of precedents already in cases where the court's actually pushing to get this used so that the process can be sped up. The other thing that's interesting about this is I like to put the lawyers and our friends in the intelligence community, the analysts there, into a bucket of the paranoid, and paranoid in a good way. They want to make sure that they didn't miss anything. And one of the other things about most of the new analytics is that they're using conceptual search. So this means that even if you're not an expert in the area, the system, the underlying software, will actually find and mine the relationships of all the information that it's processing. This is different than the type of search, and we'll talk a little bit about it in a few slides, that most of us know with Google and Bing and online services and even our intranets that are powered by Microsoft or Autonomy, or pick your favorite vendor out there. One other thing that they do is a lot of work on email threading and near dupe. Be happy to talk about it, but that's a little bit of an adjunct. So today, that marketplace has really kind of changed its game and stepped up to really doing a lot more with analytics to augment the process. But at the end of the day, it's still a human being involved, being the subject matter expert. They're just augmenting their ability. As I mentioned earlier, one of the fun markets that I did some study on when I was at Microsoft and also at FAST, but at Microsoft and then with a number of analysts in the last year or so, been really trying to understand what's going on and seeing if the trends that we saw a few years ago were holding true. Interesting couple of facts for you. 5 years ago, the CMO report that was out where they interviewed the top 150 chief marketing officers in major corporations, not one of them tracked digital marketing in their budget. Today, nearly all those players, it is over 50% or more of their budget. And why is that true? Basically, if we look at the print world, and no disrespect to the print version of KM World or other magazines, they have to figure out what parts of it go national and what parts of it go regional. So the way that a marketing person could focus their communication in the print world is basically based on the print distribution. But the minute they go to online, they can actually focus on a city or a segment of a city or any part of the country that they want to, or any part globally. Very focused. Second thing is that every one of those focused targets could be a slight variation of the main story, main ad, main print, main whatever they're trying to communicate, because it is so easy to make the change, get it out, and then target it to the audience. The other thing that we all know that they're all doing is tracking everything that we do. clicks, cookies, anything they can do to figure out what are people reading, what are they looking at, what did they look at their website, what did they do before, so we can get more information to them more in a faster way or understand the trends. Another person I know really well is one of the leading people down in New York for building new online information or marketing vehicles. He was telling me 10 years ago, for most applications that weren't digital, from idea from the creative people to approval to then implementation, was somewhere around 2 to 3 months. Today, from idea to deployment of a microsite or some new activity in the online world can be 3 days or less. That includes getting that idea, genning it up, getting it to the customer, getting it approved, and putting it online. And that all the instant feedback gives them a way to quickly change that. So one of the interesting things is that also means that smaller teams versus larger teams are tackling more and more, and the budgets are switching to this digital world. The other kind of thing is it's much easier to work with a smaller team versus a larger team. For example, putting on this webinar versus doing a face-to-face seminar is a radically different proposition, yet we get to touch just as many people, if not more, and then people come back and view it later. So if we look at kind of three of the key things that we're talking about here, digital marketing is one of the big data contributors and consumers. More information being sent and received, more digital tracking, and more tracking of digital feedback, through Twitter, Facebook, of what the consumer's doing. Another interesting fact that popped out in some of the research, and this looks at big data, one of it is it's strategic, is today's product marketing manager or marketing manager sees more information in one day than their product management counterpart saw from a data warehouse or BI tools 5 years ago in a month. Basically, the number of things that they're tracking, the amount of information they're looking at in this digital world has just gone big. Every one of the V's is hitting the marketing team big time, and all of us. Now, on the flip side, just for each one of us, we are leveraging big data ourselves. The online consumer is much smarter than they ever have been before. We can find more out about a product, read more about trends, because all this information is out there. You can visit 15, I was just looking for a new laptop. I went to 15 different sites, from Newegg to Amazon to 4 or 5 places, collecting all the information on the major laptops I was interested that fit my criteria, and then read tons of reviews. So we're actually having a great benefit on both sides of the coin. So we've kind of laid out some of the issues, so let's see if we can figure out what's going on to help people do a better job with this information. And one of the things that we talked about, and kind of at least from our perspective, because we're in the market, is text analytics is really coming on quite a bit. And there are a lot of different great text analytics solutions. We offer one. There are people doing things with sentiment analysis, predictive trend analysis, better use of some of the BI work, lots of different things going on. You can, have fun looking at, IBM's Watson, or play around with your Apple with Cersei. Some people like how Cersei responds. Some people don't. Maybe needs a little more work, but seems to be doing okay. But it's really all about how can we modernize applications or enhance some of them or replace some of them if necessary with tools and underlying technology that can deal with the volume and velocity of information that's coming down the pipes or being stored in the architecture. And what we're seeing is text analytics is being applied to that 80%, if we understand what most people are talking about when they're analyzing corporate data, that they're saying 80% is unstructured and 20% is structured data, i.e., data warehouse or database. The latest numbers I've seen is actually tweaking that more to like 85 or 90% unstructured data. And so we need to mine that information better and organize that information better. So just as there's a variety of tools in BI, there's a variety of analytic tools that can come out and help people solve the big data problem. Let's take one example. Here's an area that I actually have some personal background in, and I always find fascinating. When we started, search engines really tackled two things. Really, initially, first, mining the content. Then it started understanding the context of the user. When did they log in before? Do we know when they logged in? Do we have any history of them? But everything that they have that they're working on to bring up the most relevant information for you was all predefined. Either mining the content, what do we know about the user, what do we learn from people in the past, misspelling terms, what did they look for before that we didn't know about? If you're on a shopping site and someone types in the name of a product and it's not one of yours, did you map it to one of yours? They typed in a competitive product name, and did we know where to put that versus not show them anything? And the engines were great if you knew exactly what you were looking for, just didn't know where it was, or you knew the parameters of what you were looking for, and then drill into the set that you need. Today, there's just so much digital information and so many people tackling new areas that they know a little bit about, but they don't know all the terms in the area, or they might not understand exactly how to mine the information. Also, we see things changing so rapidly, as I mentioned before, that one approach to augment systems that is going on now is conceptual categorization. The ability for an analytics engine to build an understanding versus with examples of each category, sample documents and pieces, and then learning from those to understand that a document as it reviews it will match that category. So it doesn't have to have all the exact words correct. It doesn't have to know all the rules or not rules. It's basically built its own representation. And these systems are working to allow people to really solve problems that other people haven't been able to solve without a great deal of work on taxonomies and ontologies. And the one segment that's really starting to take advantage of this and really understands the problem are the intermediaries and data service providers. So a number of people all know Associated Press and LexisNexis, even KM World and financial people like Bloomberg and others. And their issue is that the information that they deliver is their service or revenue generator. And at the end of the day, it's all about profits versus covering costs. So to them, besides being strategic for their customers, it is core to their business. And one of the things that we worked on with one person was an example. We all heard about Hurricane Sandy, and then some slick marketing media firm came up and said, "Hey, this is bigger than this. But it's no longer officially a hurricane. So superstorm, and let's make superstorm this hot new topic and term." Well, adding to their taxonomy for any of these firms is a pretty arduous task to quickly come up with a new category. What are all the words and rules and the not rules? My favorite example is building a taxonomy. I was sitting there with a friend, and they were showing me what they did for one node, automobiles. And in there was passenger cars, trucks, sports cars, and inside of sports cars, they had the word Mustang. Well, that's neat, but they actually had 5 rules to filter out non-Mustang sports cars. So it said Mustang, not P-51, which is the old plane in World War II. Mustang horse, no. Mustang horsepower, yes. Mustang Corporation, no. It was really, they were spending more time putting what shouldn't be in the category versus what should be in the category, because that word was so important for that one category. when they're trying to generate these new things, as we go back to Superstorm, it's how can we quickly allow someone through a handful of example documents, generate a new topic or category, which becomes a new navigator so people out there in the marketplace can find things that are relevant to them that are available from that, information supplier. Because the information supplier knows, just like all of us, that the competition is just a click away on the web. So, conceptual matching to the category to make it findable, especially if someone doesn't know all the terms and you don't know the term they're typing in, it makes it easy for people to find and navigate to the right information. So if we really look at the underlying issues there for doing this kind of classification, then what you really want to be able to do inside a company, or even for some of these intermediaries, is make sure that you have consistent document categorization in all applications. So a document can be categorized at creation, and then any other types of other tags that are needed so it could be found better or acted upon better throughout each phase of the life cycle needs to be added. One of the issues, though, is a lot of the taxonomies and ontologies are still, as I mentioned, lexiconic or keyword and rule-based. So that means we need to create those kinds of rules and add keywords to every category. And it's a long, arduous process where you need to pick the minds of the experts and then flush that out. And then again, they're done by language. So that means that now that I've finished it in English, I need to build that same taxonomy with the same words and rules in French, German, Japanese, Chinese, pick your languages that you're running your business in or process documents in. And so it really needs to do a good job in all business languages for the company. And if you're an outward-facing site, in all places that you market. Again, as we talked about performance and scale, we need to really get to handling the volume and velocity, leveraging the new infrastructure. So that means an in-memory-based solution is really a great approach to solving it and having the ability to scale easily by just replicating it across servers. And another interesting point that's coming up more and more in discussions I've had with a number of the analysts working with IT groups is cybersecurity. Is one of the things they found is that a good corporate taxonomy explains the whole company and a lot of key insights. And in traditional methodologies, that file is an open text file because encrypting it would corrupt the performance of the taxonomy system in your search engine or in other places being used, which means you really can't encrypt it if you want to get the tagging done in today's world. So keeping that, your taxonomy file, at least on a secure server, or if not encrypted or some way cyber secure, is becoming another important point for these new classification systems. So as I mentioned, there are lots of different approaches out there. There is some great other alternatives versus what we offer for different niches and different opportunities. But if you look down the left-hand side of this page, I'd really like you to kind of think through that those 6 topics are the key check boxes that you need to consider or think about when you're looking to augment or solve your big data issue and trying to do better classification, organization of the information to determine how do we use it, how do we leverage it more effectively, or how do we get rid of it. For us, it should be easy. The approach should be easy. We use an example-based, approach, so it's easy to define, new categories. Just give it a couple examples, and the system learns from it. 2, consistent. Understand what is the approach that's underneath. There's lots of different models, as I mentioned. Ours is statistical. There is probabilistic, where people are taking some snapshots and then building from there. And then there's lexiconic, where they're using language-based approaches. All 3 of them are, in the computer world, are considered natural language. So mining the language and information, they just take slightly different approaches. For us, the other thing that I list here is the highest documented precision. And precision here means that there are actually IEEE white papers out from some of our partners showing that our technology produces the highest precision. And that what that means is if you had a set of documents properly categorized by experts, how do all the alternatives match against that truth set? And we've rated number one for years. There are other people that are close, and that could be good enough for you, and they also offer some other advantages. Global. As I mentioned, how many languages does the system support? In our case, we're language agnostic because we convert everything into a mathematical model and work from there. We do the same in Japanese as we do in Farsi, English, and German, or pick whatever language. As long as it's a Unicode set, we can work on it. But there are a lot of other great approaches out there that can work in multiple languages. You just need to make sure it matches your set. Cybersecurity, really make sure that you understand what's the environment this information is in, and is there things in my taxonomy or classification scheme that is exposing us to risk? If it's open and available and people are hacking your systems, you might want to figure out, am I really putting this in a secure environment or do I have some secure method? Now, as I will talk about in a little bit, a couple of markets that are doing different things with us. We've been in supporting the intelligence community for years, and we have a patent approach that we had to actually produce in order to play in the intelligence community. So there are other people who have done similar things. It's a good thing to look at. Also, is it proven? Have they done scale and performance numbers? We've done things, as we said, in the intelligence community, and so have others, and people have done some really nice stuff. And do they have something that's been documented to be proven defensible? So as you go through and maybe cleaning up your archive, there's some great articles in KM World back in September in Information Governance where we wrote one, and a number of other people wrote some nice articles about this process. We can get you the links. I know Andy and the others can point you to the white papers. And then lastly, performance. Really, what are the numbers that it's running through? How many documents per second can you process? What is the performance overall for the system? So some great approaches to the way to do stuff. I'll try to give you a couple more examples of how we've helped some different markets, and maybe you can see how some of these problems that they faced maybe aligns to your business, and whether it's us or someone else or one of our partners, how it might be able to help you solve your big data issue. So as I mentioned, in the U.S. intelligence community, they have two issues. One, extreme amounts of data that they're constantly looking at. And two, they're trying to find the hidden relationships in the data that they're getting. So one of the things that happened recently that, was the movie Zero Dark 30, and people understand that. One of the things going on in the community was they understood who all the bad guys were. What they were trying to find is, what are relationships in all the text reading, phone messages, phone calls, etc., where there's a relationship between someone that we know is bad and someone we don't know. And that's actually the underlying piece that drove the finding of bin Laden, as most people know. An analyst saw a relationship with a couple of people. They were known in the wrong places and the wrong people, talking to some people that they didn't know about. They tracked a number of those. One turned out to be a courier, and when they tracked that courier's patterns, that's when they found that there was some inconsistencies in the way that courier was working versus other people, and that's how they tracked down a relationship that got them on the trail to bin Laden. We do a lot, as I mentioned, with language agnostic for the community. They deal in all sorts of different environments and different locales, so we need to understand that. And a lot of times the information they're looking at, people are using code words or terms to obfuscate what they're trying to talk about. Because our system understands and builds a relationship between every word and how it's being used in every document within the data set, we actually will understand that a code word is being used the same way as other words, and we can, reflect that back to the author. So right now we're one of the top tools in the intelligence community to solve this set of problems. We're also working with a number of people in social media, as I mentioned. The issue is for them dictionary understanding. They can't keep up the dictionaries. The flow of information for a lot of the social information is such an extreme that they need systems that can classify and organize information quickly so they can get it to the right people to analyze, and also understand that if there's a new term, that they're not missing where it belongs because that term didn't exist in a predefined dictionary. One of my favorite markets is the intellectual property research market. Here, it's another place where, in the intelligence community, the bad guys are obfuscating terms to try to hide things. Here, the lawyers are obfuscating terms, again, to give them capability so that they get a broader patent, or so the poor patent department won't find what they call prior art in some other market or segment that will say, no, someone's already got that out there. You don't get a patent for this. And unfortunately, the patent office is buried. But a lot of the patent research firms that are helping their clients are starting to take on a new approach where they can really mine what's out there, look at what's new and different, and start looking even across geography. There's a number of our partners that are, capturing all the U.S. patents, all the global patents, and starting to really track what's going on. And also looking for, what we call the novelty items. So there's a patent kind of off by itself. Do we go after that area and write patents around it because it's a key area for us? Or no, it's a patent that was granted in the 1880s on a way to mine coal, and that really doesn't make any sense anymore, so we don't need to worry about it. A lot of research here, a lot of great work, and then a lot of times just mining of information to find the latent relationships in words related to one another that someone has purposely obfuscated that in normal reading wouldn't catch, but with a system keeping all that information within its own world, will find those relationships. So it's been a very rich experience for us and for our partners in that space. Another area is really augmenting a lot of the business analysis in BI, where lots of information still in those structured data fields is unstructured. An example that's out there is people collecting, a particular automotive company is collecting all the service reports. They have one area where it says the customer came in for an oil change, but in the text written by the service manager, which was here's what the customer complained about, or their follow-up, talks about problems with the brakes. Well, under normal BI analysis, they would see trends in oil changes and some other stuff, but because they use a conceptual classification system, that unstructured text would start to highlight a trend that a particular model car is coming in, but in multiple cases is having issues with its brakes. So a lot of interesting new analysis going on to conceptually mine and map the terms and relationships in the unstructured part of the information that's still sitting in, quote, structured databases. So trying to make sure we leave some time for Q&A, I will just try to summarize quickly 4 key points. 1, the information that we have is a key asset. It's either strategic or a burden and risk. And even if it's in that latter category, if we classify things right, we can define it as junk, have a defensible process, and get rid of it. 2, it's a large problem on top of the rest of the work people are tackling. $200 billion is not a small number over 4 years. 3, there are a lot of great text analytics approaches. that can help people organize their information, mine that information, and move it more to the strategic side and less to the burden and risk side. And lastly, the text analytics solutions have already been proven in a number of markets, and now we just need to, help augment other systems to improve them. So with that, Andy, I've kind of wrapped up a quick pass over, trying to drill into a few topics, and maybe now we can open it up to Q&A.
Well, John, I will tell you, that was tremendous. And there is a lot of stuff to talk about there. But what I will do is go back to something that I said to you at the very top of the hour, which was that I believe that there was a tension in organizations between viewing big data as a value asset versus a risk asset. Big data versus dark data. What should our listeners be most concerned about?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think they need to be concerned about both, right? So one is that the big data trend is, how do I augment my existing systems to deal, let's just talk about two of the V's, the volume and velocity. Right. And as I said, because we put this unbelievable technology infrastructure to move digital information so quickly around, that is something that we need to work on. The dark data, though, is really, to me, a huge opportunity for companies. The best part about the dark data issue is that using an example-based categorization tool where you can define junk categories. I mean, I had this conversation with a couple of partners, and they're off and running and doing some amazing things. But if you just were moving, say, from your tape backups or any archive to different new, storage devices, just like, any of us do, at least, when I move, the first thing I do is I go through the house and I say, this is going to the dump. This is going to friends and family. This is going to charity, but none of this stuff is coming with me to the new place, right? So if we look at, what companies are doing, and we could just help them, say, get 20%, even though in a lot of cases what we've seen is the numbers are close to 50, 60%. If you were just moving stuff from, say, tape backup to other environments, you have your good defined categories, but if you could just go through and say, I've got a category called, holiday emails. I've got a category called, sports fantasy. I got a category called old marketing literature. Yeah. Sorry, marketing folks, there's some, some stuff that needs to go.
That stuff's easy. What about the stuff, though, that the business, the line of business people feel is important to keep, and the legal people feels is important to not keep, and the IT people just want to get rid of because it's taking up space? Yeah, there's a tension there.
Yeah, I think the tension, is a good one, because if you define what you really need to keep, most of the business people have a pretty good definition of that. The problem is trying to create a taxonomy that will allow us to review what's out there, what we've developed. If you have, a project, for a new gene code, I'm just making something up on the fly, there's a lot of things about that are really important to keep. Probably any research documents, key communications between, the development team or whatever. But there's probably a ton of email that it could be somewhat related to that topic, but really there's nothing important in those emails. So a lot of those, if you give good examples, you could filter out and get rid of. So there's still a lot of information we think about that's in our systems that still don't have good business value. And again, it's through proper classification and knowing, here's good examples of things I want to keep, and here are things on that same topic but just aren't that important. And that if you do it right, there'll be some place where you still want a manual review. One of the examples I give is you have Project X that's really important and critical, and holiday emails. And I love my favorite one is when I was working at Microsoft. Steve Ballmer hits the send button on a holiday email. There are 90,000 copies. By the end of the week, there's 2 million copies of that email because you sent it to 10 people saying, I'm not going, blah, blah, blah. But there probably is less than 1% of those emails that an executive said to another executive, I can't take this week off because I'm working on Project X. So the classification system would probably tag that in both categories, and that's where you'd want a manual review. And probably 90% of those emails would be trash that got the dual tag, but the handful where the corporate vice president sent to the other key engineering lead the exact plans for Project X, you probably want to keep that one around. And that's the difference between just generally tagging stuff and using a little finer enrichment with examples to get the right information in the right bucket.
Well, that actually leads to a couple of questions from the audience. CJ and Linda, I think, are asking the similar question, which is, are there examples of how you can filter junk? I guess, and actually allow quality content to remain.
Yeah, there's a lot of good examples. We have some partners doing it. There's lots of other companies out there in the marketplace that are in the what we call defensible deletion business.
Yeah.
It's kind of a term that's really kind of taken off recently because everyone's trying to solve this problem. There are multiple approaches. You can use traditional taxonomies if you've built one and you want to augment that and you've got the right people on board that have the library science or taxonomy skills. And a lot of companies, do have those people. So you can get there through that methodology. The downside is with all those methodologies, as I described, by going to an example-based approach, and there's, a number of people out there in the marketplace offering, example-based solutions, it is much easier to have the machine learning and education done of the system so that it understands conceptually what it's looking for. So even documents where the terms have changed over time, this is a problem we faced with a couple of companies that, unfortunately, the people that have been in the company that have the corporate mental history for maybe 20, 30 years have retired. The new people are only been in the company, 18 months to a couple of years. They don't even know what terms were used 3, 5, 8, 9 years ago that were versions of the terms that they're using today. Unless someone added those to the taxonomy, then new people won't find the old information and won't know how to organize it and classify it. But using example-based solutions where it's taking samples of all that information and learning all those relationships, it can do the proper filtering and organization.
Yeah, and I know that if people stay on to this site for the next few minutes and don't click off, they're going to be sent to a white paper that you've written about this. I don't know if you've written. Content Analyst, anyway, is written about this subject. I want them to go there. I want them to stay and read more about the subject. But maybe there's one more question here and I'm going to warn the audience that we're going to be a couple of minutes over. It's this idea of how you believe that enormous amounts of data can be somehow leveraged to become an innovation tool for companies. And I hope I'm not putting you on the spot with that, but there's a difference between what BI used to be, which was, I can tell you, the sales reports for the last 6 months, but I can't really tell you what's going to go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think you didn't put me on the spot. I think we kind of highlighted one group that's doing that today quite well, and that's the marketing teams. They are gathering data to really see what the trends are. I hate to say it, I forgot, I don't know, there's some commercial with some, maybe it's IBM, and some woman picks out a dress, but she actually goes through in the show, no, I want this color, and I want this shape, and I want this, and it's going through the whole chain, and in a sense, even though that person's not physically doing that, they're electronically doing that today by what do they click on, what colors do they click on, what are they asking for, how quickly can we respond? Yeah. And so they're actually aggregating that information quite effectively. And the same thing is true, another case where something really interesting is going on in Google and Bing, and this is again leveraging extreme amounts of information. If you looked at the translation, the auto translation of documents 5 years ago, it was mediocre at best. I'll just be straight. The best systems I've seen were mediocre. Manual review was still the way to go. If you look at Bing and Google today, they are so good because they are dealing with such volume of information to ingest and process to build up the underlying smarts of the translation system that they've both invented. It is unbelievable. We have seen a phenomenal change where you can go to their sites and click on it. And the only reason I like Bing over Google is they expose their API so other applications can grab it. So, there are lots of places where extreme amounts of information, allow systems to actually augment the way they did things at a pace that we never thought of 5 years ago.
Well, John, I have to say that, we're past the top of the hour by a little, and this has been wonderful. I know that you and I could talk about this forever, and I think that you could talk about it forever, too. It's been a terrific presentation today. Thank you very, very, very much.
Well, thanks everyone.
I want to tell the audience that there are two things. One, that you can download the PDF of the slides. You can look at them at your leisure. But you can also go to the archive of the event and listen to it again or share it with a colleague. You can do that by going to the same URL you went to today, or you can always find it from kmworld.com. I also want to point out that as a little thank you, people who came today, I want to offer them a position in the drawing that we'll be announcing on February 28th, which is pretty soon, for the winner of this month's Apple TV. So anyway, John, this has been great. I'm enthralled by this. I'm fascinated by this subject. I'm going to listen to it again tonight, actually. And I want to tell all of our attendees, thank you very much for coming. Please come back. And this is Andy Moore from snowy and about to be snowier Maine, signing off. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.